wine auctions are about more than investing or collecting, or even fundraising. Smelling and sipping your wine may satisfy your civilized nature, but only hunting and competing for a bottle can quiet those deeper atavistic urges. It's the difference between buying frozen cutlets at the grocery store and tracking your kill on the Serengeti. I'm out for big game tonight. I laser a shaft of concentration between the auctioneer and me. My hand becomes a pack animal with which I hunt, side by side, rising and falling. A hot, primal fluid swells up into my reptile brain, willing me to snatch that bottle and run it back to my lair. Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 38. Did you know that wine auctions are on the rise, both as fundraisers and as commercial ways that you can buy and sell your cellar stash? I'm going to chat with you about why auctions are increasing in popularity, their fascinating backstory, and how you can participate in them without having a multimillion-dollar trust fund. In the show notes at nataliemclean.com/38, I'll also list some upcoming wine auctions where you might like to slip in to the back seat and see how these events roll. If you're listening to this podcast on the day it's published, please also join me on CTV News today as we'll be chatting about two of the world's most popular wines, Pinot Noir and Cabernet Sauvignon, including which ones to buy right now. If you can't tune in, then please join my wine-happy community at nataliemclean.com/join us, and I'll send you the link to the videos of these two segments. On with the show. Sitting in the center row of the auction room, I barely lift my forefinger for the 1945 Chateau Cheval Blanc. All bidders crane their necks to look at the mysterious woman who has just bid the price of a Porsche. Sold to the gentlewoman in the Prada jacket with the embroidered family crest, the auctioneer says, bringing down the hammer. The reality? I'm at the back of a room, blinking wildly, struggling to remove the eyelash from my eye. The auctioneer just winked back at me. Bad news when you're playing the blood sport of the rich. Most auction talk is about record-shattering prices paid for rare bottles, such as the 6-liter bottle of the California cult Cabernet Screaming Eagle that sold for over $500,000. That's $12,500 a glass. But most bottles don't achieve such vertiginous pricing, and most auctions don't generate more than 16-second bursts of excitement. In fact, their studied calm is kind of more like that of a tax audit hall, pierced only when someone jumps up with the gleeful news of a bad return. Worldwide, auction sales are more than just over $100 million, but that's still only a small proportion of the total retail market in the U.S. of $16 billion. However, wine auctions are actually efficient fundraisers, since the shortest route to social good is gluttony. Appeasing the appetites of the elite has always been an effective way to rally support for good causes. Unlike a check, a $100 bottle of wine can raise more than its appraised value if bidders are willing to support a good cause. Many collectors have more wine than they can drink in a lifetime, so getting them to donate some bottles is often easier than persuading them to part with cash. When the wine is donated, the auction's overhead is low, and most of the proceeds go to a good cause. Gala dinners, by contrast, incur substantial food costs that have to be paid first. And if the auction is registered under the Income Tax Act, the bottle's appraised market value is tax deductible, regardless of the hammer price. For those who buy the wine, however, there's no tax receipt. Now, there's just no need to be avaricious as well as gluttonous. Tonight's attendees come from one of three groups: those who support the cause but don't know much about wine, those who know a lot about wine but nothing about the cause, and those who have wandered into the wrong room from the wedding reception down the hall. Members of the second group show up in most of the city's auctions, more often in khakis than pinstripes. The coin-operated collectors among them can be seen balancing the auction catalog, a glass of wine, and a laptop loaded with spreadsheets. Of course, wine auctions are nothing new. In 1766, James Christie of London, England, sold a large quantity of, quote, Madeira and high-flavored claret, that's Bordeaux, late of the property of the noble personage deceased, end quote. Christie went on to found one of the world's largest commercial auction houses that sells wine for profit in the UK, the US, and several other countries. Until recently, though, wine auctions, like wine drinking, were the domain of rich, self-absorbed hedonists who could appreciate and afford the wines sold. Today, the popularity of wine auctions reflects the upswing in wine drinking across a broad social spectrum. Increased affluence is one factor, and instant gratification is definitely another. Most wine is consumed within 17 minutes of purchase, roughly the time it takes to drive home from the liquor store. Such impatience doesn't lend itself to storing wine for years, but it does bloat wine drinkers' tolerance to pay for mature wine to drink immediately. Many mature and rare wines are no longer available in stores, having been long sold to those who are now cellaring them. But buying them is important when you want to drink wines that were made the year you were born, married, or, depending on the settlement, divorced. Few people can afford a $450,000 Impressionist painting, but many more can afford to splurge on a $100 bottle of wine. Bordeaux, Burgundian, and California wines from older vintages are often less expensive at auction than our recent vintages in stores now, a surprising fact given that mature wines have accumulated storage costs and are often peaking in taste. But escalating wine prices in the last 5 years have distorted traditional age-price ratios, and speculators profit by reselling the next new hot wines. Auctions are like the frontal disturbances of the wine world, the locus where Venus trends gain momentum. The first stratospheric prices for California cult Cabernets were fetched at auctions, signaling their arrival among the world's serious wines. The influence of U.S. wine critic Robert Parker came down with the hammer. Prices of the wines he scored over 90 points were boosted skyward by the Parker effect. Some vintners use auctions to set prices for the new harvest, the most famous being the annual Hospice de Beaune in Burgundy, France, which sets the prices of Burgundian wines. A word of caution, though, buying wine at auction isn't always a sound investment strategy. Prices can swing wildly with fashion. A case of 1945 Mouton Rothschild sold for just over $81,000 one year, and then in that same year was resold for $51,000. Of course, if you buy wines you like, you can always drink your liquid assets if the market collapses. But wine auctions are about more than investing or collecting, or even fundraising. Smelling and sipping your wine may satisfy your civilized nature, but only hunting and competing for a bottle can quiet those deeper atavistic urges. It's the difference between buying frozen cutlets at the grocery store and tracking your kill on the Serengeti. I'm out for big game tonight. I laser a shaft of concentration between the auctioneer and me. My hand becomes a pack animal with which I hunt, side by side, rising and falling. A hot primal fluid swells up into my reptile brain, willing me to snatch that bottle and run it back to my lair. Good auctioneers inflame these urges, whipping bidders into a feeding frenzy. Quote, when you're down to 2 bidders, and it's about speed, going back and forth between them as quickly as possible, And using peer pressure or reminding them of the cause is a good strategy, says Ottawa lawyer Lawrence Greenspan, whose gift of the gavel has been used at several local auctions. He hastens to add that it's not all lion eat gazelle. Quote, I try to start at a reasonable price to get many people involved in the bidding, he says. And even if some drop out, at least they've participated and had some fun. End quote. The physical vocabulary of nods, raised fingers, head-to-head consultations, and withering looks are the wealthy gesticular cousins of baseball signals. The peacock tactic of spread plumage, leaving your paddle aloft in the air throughout the bidding, tells interlopers, back off because I'm not backing down on this one. But how do you avoid a bidding war? Well, you may not want to if you enjoy the cut and thrust. And since the proceeds go to a good cause, think about how many kids will be warm this winter, or how many artists can buy new brushes because you bought that Lafitte. The best way not to worry your mythical bank manager is to write down your maximum bids beside bottles in the catalog that interest you before the auction starts. Ah, but when you win that bottle, you're the Michael Jordan of wine auctions. Other bidders clap. You feel loved. Or at least your wallet is loved, and you by extension. A successful struggle results in an acquisition story, a prerequisite for dinner parties. The story's even better if a celebrity previously owned the bottle. At a Sotheby's auction, Andrew Lloyd Webber's cellar of 18,000 bottles went for more than $6 million. The inflated price now known as the celebrity premium. Of course, this doesn't guarantee good taste, just the same taste as the man who gave us Phantom of the Opera. The only drawback to wine auctions is that you may end up buying an expensive bottle of vinegar. Unlike jewelry, fine art, and cars, wine is a living substance that changes depending on how it's kept. Organizers can't guarantee a bottle's provenance, its storage conditions before it was put up for auction. Provenance comes from the French word provenir and means to come forth, the story of the wine's origin, who owned it, and how it was stored. Pristine provenance would mean that the wine was consigned to auction from a winery where it was kept at about 13 degrees Celsius, 70% humidity, no light, with the bottle kept on its side to keep the cork wet, if it has a cork. The next best origin would be wine from a late, large cellar owner whose wines have been consigned to auction by the ungrateful, uncultivated heirs who want to spend the estate holdings in dissolute ways. But in fact, many mature wines have had several owners and varying storage conditions. While some auction organizers ask donors questions about storage or even visit the cellars, they can't guarantee the wine will be in good shape. And unlike the liquor store, they won't take back a bad bottle. So just as you might go back to the stables to look at the horses before a race, check out the wines on preview before the auction begins. If the wine has been stored in overheated places, kitchens, car trunks, attics, the best way to tell visually is ullage, the airspace between the cork and the wine. Recently bottled wines have gaps of less than a centimeter. After about 15 years, some wine will naturally evaporate through the cork, and a fill level to just the bottle's top shoulder is acceptable. But a level below bottle shoulder could mean excess oxidation. And if the bottle or label is stained with wine, it could also mean the storage was too hot, causing seepage. In every auction, somewhere between the middle and the end, there's a turning point when most people withdraw, tired and spent. This is when veteran hunters rise up from the bush to pounce on the remaining lots. Tonight, I scamper off with a meaty second-growth chateau at a vulture-picking price of $75. Wine auctions are no longer old money gatherings where everyone buys lifestyle moments and belongs to the same club. Today, they open up a new world of buying mature wine at great prices while supporting good causes and making your cave-dwelling ancestors proud. Well, there you have it. You'll find links to a number of different wine auctions in various cities, including Ottawa's Music and Beyond auction on September 27th, in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/38. I'll also include more tips about participating in auctions and donating to them. These auctions take place annually, so even if you don't catch them this time, you can put them in your calendar for next year. Did you know that you can now listen to this podcast on your smart speaker? Just say, "Hey Google," or for Amazon's Echo, I'll use her name that begins with the letter A. I won't say it now as it'll set off your device and mine. So I'll just say, "Madam A, play the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast." I'd love to chat with you about wine while you're peeling some grapes, dozing in the hammock, or changing a furnace filter. It's always wine time. What was your favorite tip or quote from this episode? Share that with me on Twitter or Facebook and tag me at Natalie McLean. On Instagram, I'm at Natalie McLean Wine. If you like this episode, please tell a friend about it, especially one who's interested in participating in a wine auction or donating to it. My podcast is easy to find whether you search Google on its name, Unreserved Wine Talk, or on mine. Finally, if you want to take your ability to pair wine and food to the next level, join me in a free online video class at nataliemclain.com/class. I can't wait to share more wine stories with you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this one. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps something you hunted down, or should I say won, at auction. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now at nataliemclain.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.